Welcome. On this channel, I spend a lot of time talking about specific use cases with specific prompts that you can use to get instant results. But sometimes you just want to build your own prompts. Perhaps there's something you want to do, a one-off task. And so in this video, I'm going to share with you some really powerful little elements of prompts, things that you can build into your prompts to significantly improve the results that you get. I call these prompt blocks. They are just small little extracts, things that we can put into our prompts. And so I'm going to demonstrate 5 of them in this video. 5 things that you'll definitely want to keep these to hand to use when you are building prompts. So I'm going to go across to ChatGPT and walk you through these 5. But first, before I do that, if you have visited this channel several times, you'll know I talk a lot about the power of having prompt templates, about having a prompt library, essentially a database of places where you can find all of your prompts that you want to use, that you can find them quickly, grab them, copy and paste them into ChatGPT, run them and get quick results. But I'm not going to talk about different pre-written prompts. I'm going to talk about something called prompt blocks. These are small little extracts that you can use. And if you do use my prompt library and you go to the filter, you can find these prompt blocks. So the first one I'm going to look at today is a really powerful one called request for context. If I go to ChatGPT and I'm just going to open up a prompt I ran. And so let me just go to the top here. Imagine that you are going on holiday. So I happen to be going to the Algarve. I live in Portugal. I'm going to the Algarve this weekend. And I might want to do something like this. I might want to say, I'm going on holiday to the Algarve in Portugal, and I want you to give me some recommendations of places to visit. And if you run a prompt like that with GPT-5, it will do a fairly good job. You can see it's a pretty good response here, but there's a problem with this response. It's very generic. It doesn't take into account my specific things. I know, for example, that Tavira is actually the wrong side of the Algarve for me. I don't really have time to go to the Tavira. We're only going for 3 days. So whilst this is great generic advice, it's not very specific. And the reason for that, it's my fault because I didn't give it context. I talk a lot about with prompt engineering, we want to give context. The more context we give, the more information we give, the background information, the better the response. But when we're in a rush to do something, when we do a quick prompt like this one, we sometimes forget to do those things. So over in the prompt library, I have one called request for context. And if you use this, you just have to grab it, copy and paste. It's quite short. Here's the prompt. You just simply add this to your prompt. It says here, before completing the task, always check if more context is needed. Read the user's query, identify any gaps, ambiguities, or missing details that could affect quality. Ask the user for 2 to 4 concise clarification questions that would help improve the response. Wait for the user's answers. Only after receiving the extra information, proceed with the task and deliver the final results. So if I was creating a quick prompt like that one, I would just hit copy to clipboard. I would go back to here and I would copy and paste it in. So let's run this prompt again. I'm going on holiday to the Algarve in Portugal. I ran it again and here's the prompt, and I just copied this here. And what it then did when I ran this prompt is it then said, okay, to tailor the best recommendations for your Algarve holiday, I just need a bit more context. And it's then told me what would be really useful. Where will I be based? How many days? Will I have a car? What sort of experience? So that then prompted me to then say, we're staying in Lagos for 3 days. We love nature and hiking and also history. We will have a car so we can travel, but we don't want to travel too far because we only have 3 days. And so what it's given me now is a much, much better response. It's given me a 3-day itinerary. It's specifically focused on things that are near Lagos. So we'll start off in Lagos Old Town, which by the way is amazing. If you've never been, it's fantastic. And then there's some trips here suggesting to nearby places. I definitely want to go to Silvesh Castle, which I've heard lots of great things about. So this is a much, much better response. It's more specific to what my specific needs are because there is more context, because it's prompted me to give the context. So I call that one, if you're using the prompt library, I call it request for context. It's a really simple thing you can copy and paste into a quick prompt, and it will then prompt you to give it some more information, and then you'll get a better response, a better answer. Okay, let's look at another one, because another aspect of what we should build into our prompts is be more specific about the output that we're looking for. What are we looking for? We're looking for a long response, a short response, who's it for? There's a lot of considerations in terms of the output format, and sometimes we forget to build these things in when we're in a rush to do a prompt. So let's look at a way that we could do this fast. And if I go to my prompt blocks, I have one called output format, which is here. This is basically a short little checklist of things to put into your, let me just pull this up, into your prompt. So output format. Set your preferred output. What's the explanation level? Sometimes we want to have the response explained to us like we're 5 years old. Perhaps you're doing some very technical research in something difficult and you want it explained in simple terms. So specifying the explanation level, whether it's for a 5-year-old, 11-year-old, a beginner in the field, a college student, etc., this can make a big difference in terms of the output. What about the writing style, particularly if you're writing something like a blog post? And the tone, what about the length that we're looking for? Do we want it structured in a particular way? We might then want to get more complex with things like, do we want it as Markdown or JSON format or CSV? Do we want sections in there? What about the voice? What about examples? And what about assumptions disclosure? Do we want it to tell us the assumptions it's made in the response or not? So let me show you how I would apply this. And again, once you have this in a prompt library, you can copy and paste it really fast. So let me go across and pick up output format demo. So imagine that I want to write a short blog post. Perhaps I'm an accountant in practice and I want to write a short blog post about the different ways of structuring a business. So write me a short blog post about the best way to structure a business, e.g. sole trader, LLC, limited company, etc. And so it's given me this response. And whilst there's nothing wrong with this response necessarily, it's not really in the format that I would necessarily want for my blog post. So because I've not specified the format, the output format. So there's the response it gave me, but what if I then copy and paste this in? So here's my original prompt, write me a short blog post about the best way to structure a business, and then we've got the output format. We want the explanation to be for an 11-year-old, somebody who's not experienced. This is for business owners who don't understand the technical stuff. I want it to be instructional and authoritative. I want it to be short. I want the structure to be paragraphs in Markdown, and I want headings and subheadings. I want an intro, a body, and a conclusion. So this little checklist just reminded me to specify how I want it to look. And now when you look at this for me would make a better format for producing a blog post, a better response than this one. Now, just a little aside, these little prompt blocks are really useful when you are creating things very quickly. Of course, I would recommend that if, for example, you were writing blog posts regularly, you'd be better off actually creating a proper prompt template with a template structure built into it, with examples built into it for it to follow, and then you would use that prompt template every single time. You probably wouldn't want to use this for a blog post because I guess it's a recurring thing. But there will be times when you do a quick prompt and you're thinking, oh, I need to specify the format. What should I consider? Should I think about writing tone? Yes, let me talk about writing tone. Instead, just copy then paste this and then just fill in the different things. Think of it as a checklist that you can then give to ChatGPT for the different things to think about with output format. Okay, let's look at another one. This one I really love if you do research, particularly if you are doing technical stuff. If you're let's say an accountant in practice and you want to do some tax research, then this little prompt block is really powerful. The prompt block is called targeted research. And let me explain it by way of a demo. So I will just go back to my demos. And so imagine that you have a prompt where you want to do some research. And the one I've got here is, I want to leave the UK and become non-resident for tax purposes. What do I need to do to ensure I no longer pay UK tax? I live in Portugal, I used to be in the UK. And it's given me this response. And whilst there's nothing necessarily wrong with this, when we're doing research, one of the things that ChatGPT does, which is great, is it does cite its sources. I did, by the way, turn on search because I wanted it to specifically search the internet. I wanted the latest news, so I put search on, and it gives you the citations where it's come from. And so as I go through this research on the tax issues of leaving the UK, I've got BDO's website. Here, some of their stuff. We have some stuff from the UK government. As I go through, we've got the Financial Times. And if you're doing really serious research, if, for example, you're an accountant doing tax research, you probably don't want to rely necessarily on something like newspapers like the Financial Times, because we don't know how accurate that's going to be. We want our research to be the best sources. And so if we're doing tax research, we probably want to use the government websites, the tax websites. And so this is what the prompt block does. It says, here's the prompt. I want to leave the UK and become non-resident for tax purposes. What do I need to do to ensure I no longer pay UK tax? When conducting your research, you must use the search tool to locate information directly from source. So we have a variable here, which we'll fill in at the end. And at the end, I specifically said, I want the source to be the UK government's tax websites. That's the most credible source. Your web search must be restricted exclusively to whatever it is, the source, and its subdomains. Do not use third-party blogs, summaries, or news outlets. For each key point or finding, I want you to provide direct proof using exact quotation from the source. Place the quotation in quotation marks followed by a clear citation or URL reference. Where applicable, identify and explain any exceptions, conditions or thresholds mentioned in the same source. Do not paraphrase without including the verbatim quote alongside your interpretation. The output should clearly separate your summary or interpretation from the quoted evidence for transparency and verification. So this was the response before. Probably okay, but all sorts of different sources. And if we go to the second one, we can see here that all of the sources are from, in this case, the UK government. We've got verbatim quotes here. So this is about non-residents paying tax only on UK source income, etc., etc. We've got the statutory residency tests. And this is a much more, I guess, me being an accountant, this is a better response if I'm doing tax research. This is coming from credible sources, the government. It's got the quotations in there. I can go through and read things further if I need to. This is a really good piece of research for non-residents. So this is the code block, the little prompt block that I recommend you use whenever you're doing research, and in particular what you want to do is where you want to point to and specify the sources, the sites to use in its research rather than picking up things like blog posts. So let's move on to number 4. And the fourth one is, have you ever found sometimes that you've asked it to do something and it just comes up with some ridiculous waffle at the start that we don't need, perhaps at the end as well. We just wanted to do the thing. We just want the output. And where that's particularly important, and I find it useful, is if I am asking it to create some content where once it's finished, I want to copy and paste that into somewhere else. It could be a blog post, it could be a social post or whatever. And if it's got some preamble at the start and something at the end, like questions, we have to edit that back out, or we can't just hit the copy button and paste. So sometimes we just want the output. And that's where I have a little prompt block called no preamble. And this is what it looks like. It's a really short one. And again, I will demonstrate it inside ChatGPT. So I did a quick prompt where I said, I want to write a short Facebook post about my experience of going into the local Starbucks and wondering why they always gave 3 different choices for each drink. I discovered the idea of the good, better, best. That should have been, by the way, as a strategy, just as an aside. I often speak to ChatGPT, and so it got strategy as trapper-G, which was kind of funny. It actually doesn't make a difference. It's fairly forgiving of spelling mistakes in some respects. Anyway, let me go back again. I discovered the idea of the good, better, best strategy and how that makes Starbucks a lot of money. So that's what I want a short post about. And so here it goes with the response. It says, here's a short Facebook post version you could use. Ever wondered why Starbucks gives you 3 size options for every drink, tall, grande, and venti? If you're not aware, I've spent 25 years teaching accounting firm owners value pricing, how to price. So this is something I talk about a lot. And so there's the blog post, the Facebook post, and then it says, would you like me to make it sound more story-like and conversational? And sometimes that's useful and okay, we want that, but sometimes we just don't want the preamble at the start, we don't want this, we just want the output, because then we can hit the copy button and paste it to wherever we want to use that output. But I can't do that here because of the bits I don't want. So how do we fix that? Well, really simple. We use this simple code block here, prompt block. I want to write a short Facebook post, and then it says, only give me what I've asked for. Avoid any preamble. For example, here is what you have asked for, and avoid any follow points or questions. I only want the output. So when you put that in there, I get just the output. Now it's funny, it's still got this trapper-G in here, but that was because it didn't understand my spoken original instruction here for strategy. But here you go. I popped into my local Starbucks today and couldn't help but notice something. Every drink comes with 3 size options, tall, grande, venti. I used to think it was just for variety, but it turns out there's a strategy behind it. Okay, that's great. I could then copy and paste that straight into Facebook, upload an image, job done. That's that one. Okay, I have one more to share with you in this video. If you're finding this valuable, please let me know by hitting that thumbs up. And also, if you have not yet subscribed, please subscribe. I would really appreciate that. And if you hit the bell notification when you subscribe, you will get notifications when I create new videos. Okay, number 5, the 5th one. And this is, if you have followed prompt engineering, if you follow my videos, you'll know that we often get a better output if we tell the large language model like ChatGPT to play a specific role. So, for example, if we're doing travel research, if we want the trips to the Algarve I've got coming up, then if we ask ChatGPT to play the role of let's say a travel guide or a tour guide, we often get a better answer, sometimes the sort of response you would expect from somebody playing that role. And so I always, with my standard prompts, the prompt templates in the library, I would always do that. I would include a role. But if I'm doing a quick prompt, sometimes I'm trying to think, well, what would be the best role? Who would be the best person to give me this sort of advice? And so I have one called Role Generator. If I just go to the prompt library, if I type in role It's called ChatGPT Role Generator. And this is, if you're using multiple one of these little ideas I've shared, this will be the last thing that you probably do, the last thing in the process. And it's a simple little snippet of prompt that once you've written the rest of the prompt, it will then suggest 3 different possible roles for it to play. Let me go across to a demonstration and show you this. So I'm just going to pull up one I did just a few minutes ago, and I'm going to use this particular task we've already looked at earlier, which is I'm going on holiday to the Algarve in Portugal, and I want you to give me some recommendations of places to visit. And then you remember right at the start I suggested the one for getting more context, the request for context. And so that I've added that response in here. We are staying in Lagos for 3 days. We love nature and hiking and also history. We'll have a car so we can travel, but we don't want to travel too far because we only have 3 days. So imagine I did that from earlier, but I now want to add in a role. So here's what it says. We just then say we add this in here from the prompt library. I want you to identify the best person to help me with the task being our prompt. You will give me 3 ideas using the following format, and we can give it a format and then we give it examples. And we do that because we will always get a better response if we specify the format or the template, and then if we give examples, then it will follow those examples, because these large language models are not intelligent. They simply look for patterns. And so when I give it that, what we end up is 3 choices. And you can then pick on whichever one you feel is most appropriate. And I think this one, act as a tour guide specializing in the Western Algarve region with deep local insight into cultural sites, coastal trails, and hidden natural gems near Lagos. Okay, that sounds like a great role. So I would just copy that. I would paste it, copy the original task and put it in here. So now we've got act as a tour guide. Then we've got I'm going on holiday to the Algarve, which was our very first prompt at the start of the video, and then there's the extra context. So when we do that, when we take this fairly poor prompt and we add context and we give it a role, now what we get is a really interesting response that we would expect from a tour guide, talking us through our 3 days, exactly what we could do, starting off in Lagos and going to the Old Town. And this is a really good prompt. Now, whether you feel this is a better prompt than the very first one we did without the role, that's sometimes a matter of just personal preference. Sometimes, particularly with more important tasks like financial analysis, it can make a very big difference. If we ask ChatGPT to play the role of a financial accountant or a tax advisor or a legal expert, in those cases, I definitely see an improvement in the sorts of responses. But even with this, asking it to act as a tour guide, the response is in the sort of format that I would expect a tour guide to give us, with talking us through how we would spend our 3 days. Okay, so please tell me in the comments below, of those 5, which is your favourite? We've covered the following: the request for context, where we add in a little bit that asks ChatGPT to tell us what more information it needs before it then does the final result. We had the output format, where it's like a little checklist that we can then tell it the different format, the length, the writing style, etc. We then had the target research. If you're doing any form of research, this little snippet, this little prompt block will then instruct ChatGPT to stick to specific sources, and you can specify those sources. Then number 4, we had the no preamble. If all we want is just the output, not any kind of preamble or questions at the end. And then finally, we've looked at how we can then create a role for it to play for our prompt before we then run the final one. Which is your favorite? Please let me know. Or perhaps you have some other things that you always put into your prompts that help you to get better results. Thank you so much for watching the video right through to the end. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you again on another video.